we've hurt. Column 1, we just simply make a list of those we've hurt in the by our sexual conduct of the past. Column 2, what did I do? Did I commit adultery? Did I selfishly demand that they have sex with me when they didn't want to? Did I demand that they do things with me they really didn't want to do? If I know who I hurt, I know what I did to hurt them too. So column 2 is very simple. Column 3, which part of self is affected? Now, I think this might be one of the most revealing things we can do for ourselves in column 3. You would think that if I hurt anybody in the sexual area, it would be caused by the sex instinct. And I guess once in a while that's probably true. Sometimes to get the emotional, the physical gratification that comes at the moment of completion of the sex act, I might be doing the wrong thing with the wrong person at the wrong time because of the sex instinct. But I think if we carefully look at each situation, we're probably going to find that the other two instincts are involved just as much as the sex instinct, in many cases even more so, and sex really doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with it. Now I'm going to express an opinion, and I want to make it clear now it's my opinion, not AA's opinion, not Joe's opinion or anybody else's, my opinion. I'm convinced today that God gave us the sex urge so that we could reproduce ourselves. I'm also convinced He made it a very pleasurable thing so we would do so. I just don't believe you and I would do the kind of work involved in sex if we didn't get some kind of reward for doing so. And the reward is that great, great feeling that we get at the moment of completion of the sex act, one of the most enjoyable feelings a human being can experience. Now, if we're doing sex for purposes other than reproduction or enjoyment, we just might be doing it for reasons that God didn't intend in the first place. For instance, we boys found at a very early age you can use sex to build your self-esteem. After all, the more members of the opposite sex you can attract to yourself, the greater man you really are, we thought. Now, we boys call that John Wayneism. I don't know what you girls called it. Joe said Jane Wayne. But some of you girls tell me you use sex for the same purposes. Now, that's not to reproduce nor to enjoy. That's to fulfill a part of the social instinct, to build our self-esteem. Sex really doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with that. Sometimes we use sex to buy material security. Maybe we're in a sexual situation we really would rather not even be in. But we've come so overly dependent upon another human being for our material security that we give sex to buy back material security. That's not to reproduce or to enjoy. That's to fulfill a part of the social instinct. Sometimes we use sex to buy a personal relationship. Maybe we're just lonesome. Maybe we just want somebody to pay attention to us. And we found out a long time ago we can give sex and buy back a personal relationship. Has nothing to do with reproduction or enjoyment. That's to fulfill a part of the social instinct. Well, sometimes we use sex to get even with another human being. Maybe we find out our partner's done something they shouldn't do, infuriates the hell out of us, and we say we'll show them, and we'll go out and do the same identical thing to get even with them. And the fallacy is after we've done it, we can't afford to tell them we did it. But there we certainly didn't use it to reproduce or to enjoy. We used it to get even with another human being. Sex doesn't have much to do with that. Why, sometimes we use sex to force our will on another human being. Maybe our partner isn't doing what we think they ought to do, and we say we'll show them. We'll just cut them off at the pass, and we won't let them have any until they come around our way of thinking. Now, we boys aren't too good at that. We only last about 3 days. But you girls have honed it to perfection. You know exactly how to do that. So. Now, that's not to reproduce, that's not to enjoy, that's to force our will on another human being. I was absolutely amazed when I filled out this third column, when I saw what I had really, really been doing with sex. I always thought I was oversexed. No, I wasn't oversexed, I was undersecure. And I used sex to build my security and my self-esteem. It wasn't because I'm oversexed, I was simply undersecure. And when I saw that, a great thing began to happen. I began to lose a lot of my guilt and my remorse. I began to see that those things I did wasn't because I was a bad human being. It was because I'm a sick human being. And I needed that sex in order to build my self-esteem and my security and etc. And a lot of that old guilt began to disappear right here in the third column. The other thing that happened to me is when I saw what I had been using it for, it began to look kind of stupid to do that. And the desire to go out and do it at the wrong time in the wrong place began to become a little bit less, and I began to get a handle on this sexual thing right here in this third column. Just amazed the hell out of me when I saw that. Because I'm looking at the truth behind it. See, never looked at the truth before. Column 4. What feelings did I create in others? Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What should I have done instead? Not only are we looking at the things we did to hurt another human being, we need to be looking at the things we should have done instead. We're trying to shape a new sex life in the future where we can still enjoy it and engage in it, yet not hurt other people. So we're looking not only at what we did do, but what we should have done instead of that. Column 5. Which character defect is involved here? What caused me to do that? Did I do it because of selfishness? Did I do it because of dishonesty? Did I do it because I was self-seeking and frightened, afraid if I didn't get it done, it'd be too late to do it? Did I do it through inconsideration of other human beings? Same old character defects. Now just think. If I stay selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, I'm going to keep right on doing the same old things. Keep right on hurting people in the sexual area. They're going to retaliate. And if they don't catch me, I'm scared to death what they're going to do if they do catch me. And the remorse and the guilt is going to eat me up. And eventually I end up getting drunk over these things. So at the very least, we're going to have to do something about some of it. If I could become a little less selfish, a little less dishonest, a little less self-seeking, frightened, a little less inconsiderate, then maybe I wouldn't hurt so many people. And I might be able to live with this and still enjoy it and stay sober at the same time. Once again, we're doing step 4. This is the sexual conduct part of it. So we put a little 4 up at the top of the sheet. Out in the 5th column, I see the exact nature of the wrong I want to talk about in step 5. You know, I don't care how many times a guy has committed adultery. Well, what I really want to know is what causes him to do that. Is he doing it through just plain dishonesty, or is he doing it because of fear? Is he doing it because of inconsideration? That's the things we'll have to work on. In the 5th column, we see the defects we'll become willing to turn loose of in 6. In the 5th column, we see the shortcomings we'll ask God to take away in 7. And quite naturally, all the names in column 1 will be people we've harmed, and they come off of this sheet to be added to the sheet to be used later on for steps 8 and 9. And another thing that amazed me is when I looked at this very carefully. Hell, I kept seeing the same names appear on this sheet. I resented Barbara, I feared Barbara, and I hurt Barbara in this area too. I even had the Internal Revenue Service on all 3 sheets. I resented them and I feared them, and I gave them a pretty good screwing before I got through with them. Okay, now the book says, in this way we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test, was it selfish or not. The book doesn't care how you have sex. If you want to have sex hanging upside down by your toenails, that's fine. But if you're doing it for selfish reasons, then it might hurt somebody else.
We need prayer 3 different times here, and here's the first one.
We ask God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed.
Whatever ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. More prayer. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Now, God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice.
I think this is an area that we don't need a whole lot of advice in. I think every one of us, deep down inside, I think we know what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. Besides that, you start asking people for sexual advice, and you ask a half a dozen different people about the same thing, you're probably going to get a half a dozen different answers. And then you're going to have to try to decide which one of those to follow. So I don't think we need a whole lot of advice in this area. Besides that, I can't think of a worse place in the world to get sexual advice than around Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a bad place to look for that kind of advice.
Now, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Well, some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. Now, if we're sorry for what we've done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we'll be forgiven and have learned our lesson. Now, if we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing. These are facts of our experience. Now, to sum up about sex, more prayer. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, and for sanity and the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the horny condition. It quiets the imperious urge. When to yield would meet heartache.
Old Bill used some fancy words in here, didn't he? Yeah. Okay, now we're going to do one more little suggestion. When we get to the step 8, it says we've got the list. We made it when we took step 4. What did we do with that thing?
What did you do with it?
I don't know. It's there somewhere.
Can't see that thing on the...
Yeah, okay. We found some of the people we had harmed on the resentment sheet, some on the fear sheet, and some on the sex sheet. There's probably still going to be some other people, though, that we've harmed in ways other than sexual and that haven't shown up on any of these sheets yet. Maybe some we undercut their jobs and took it away from them, or maybe some we just stole their money, or many, many ways we hurt other people. So we're going to suggest one more little form called a review of harms other than sexual. And we do it the same way we did the other forms. Column 1, who did I hurt? Column 2, what did I do? Column 3, which part of self is affected? Column 4, what feelings did I create in others? And column 5, where had I been? Just exactly like the other sheets. We get through with this sheet, we're still doing number 4 up at the top. We'll have all the information we need for 5, 6, and 7 out in the 5th column. And the names on column 1 will come off and be added to the sheet to be used later on for step 8. Then when we're through with this sheet, we've got all the information we need now inventory-wise for steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Did we make a list of dirty, filthy, nasty items? Did we do anything to be afraid of? Did we do anything too complicated? No, it's a very simple process in looking at this stuff. Now, the book says on page 70, if we've been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. He didn't say it, but we've listed and analyzed our fears. We've listed and analyzed our sexual harms. We've listed and analyzed our harms other than sexual. We've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. Now look at the positive happening here. Nothing negative about any of these action steps. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. This is a hell of a personality change taking place already. We don't have to wait to step 12 to get something out of this. We have listed the people we've hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you've already made a decision,
which is step 3,
and an inventory of your grosser handicaps,
step 4,
you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. One of the great mistakes we see people making in AA, they want to hang around AA until they get well and then do step 4. They want to wait till they get well so they can do step 4 perfect. We'll never do step 4 perfect. You know, we've looked at our grosser handicaps.
Our resentments and our fears and our sexual harm and our harms done to other people other than sexual.
We've looked at our grosser handicaps.
Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate attitudes.
Now, the book recognizes we'll never do this perfect. We do the absolute best we can. And we've seen the truth behind those things that are really giving us a hard time. We've gotten rid of a bunch of that junk too. Now later on we got another step where we're going to re-hone this process for the rest of our life. But we'll never do it perfect in step 4. The main thing to do is do it and get on with it and gather up the information so we can do the rest of the steps. So you can't do 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 until you've done a good step 4. Now, I don't know whether you all have ever noticed or not, but nearly all the information in the big book on sex is on page 69. Yeah, it really is now. I don't know that it has any significance whatsoever, but that's where it is. We heard a story about a young lady came to AA, went to her sponsor and said, "Sponsor, I got a problem." And sponsor said, "What is it?" And she said, "Well, it's this sex thing." She said, "Sober, I just don't know what to do or how to function." Said, "Anything I've ever done in the sexual area, tried to attract a member of the opposite sex or anything, it's always been while drinking, and I just don't know what to do." The sponsor said, "Well, go home and get your big book out. Read page 69, and it will answer any questions that you might have." So the young lady went home, got her big book out, but she got confused on page numbers. Instead of page 69, she read page 96. Why don't you just for the hell of it go to page 96 and see what she read? I think that's one of the most appropriate things I ever read. It just goes on and on. Ready for break?
Winning tickets still on the roll.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take our break. We're going to have the drawing now right after the break period, we'll be drawing for the Cruise for Two as well as the Big Book. And the winning ticket is still on the roll. Nobody has purchased it yet. You got one more chance to get it. Let's break about 15 minutes.
The last session. Let's go to page 72.
We're going to find that things are going to move fast now. We've got all of our information gathered up. So now let's see what we're going to do with it. It won't take long.
Yeah, this chapter is called Into Action. Not into thinking, but into action. And action is a magic word, now called synonymous. Having made our personal inventory, well, what should we do about it? Well, we've been trying to get a new attitude. Remember, Dr. Jung said ideas, emotions, and attitudes? We're trying to get some new attitudes. A new relationship with our Creator. Back on page 45, it said the main object of this book was enabling me to find a power greater than myself, which would solve my problem. So I'm trying to get a new relationship with my Creator and discover the obstacles in my path. And what are some of those obstacles? My resentment, my fears, my harms done to other people, through sexual. We've admitted certain defects. And what are those defects? Selfish, self-centered, frightened, and inconsiderate attitudes. We've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the fifth step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter.
Okay, now we've got to look at a couple of words here. We know that step 5 says we admit it to God, to ourselves, and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. But you'll notice here in the narrative on step 5, he said the exact nature of our defects. And people used to ask Bill about this. They said, Bill, why did you use the word wrongs in the step, but in the narrative on 5, you used the word defects? And by the way, Bill, what's the difference anyhow between a wrong in 5, a defect in 6, and a shortcoming in 7? And we've known two ladies that worked with and for Bill for years, and they both told us the same thing, that Bill would kind of rear back and smile, and he would say, when I took English and writing courses in college, they taught me not to use the same words over and over. Shows how dumb you are.
You know.
He said there's no difference in these things. He said we're going to find out in step 4, those things that block us off from God and create our problems for us. He said we're going to talk about them to another human being in step 5. We're going to be willing to turn them loose in step 6. And we're going to ask God to take them away in 7. And he said you can call them anything you want to. A wrong, a fault, a mistake, a defect, a shortcoming, a personality flaw, or whatever you wish to. And we're going to notice on the next 2 or 3 pages that's exactly what he does. He uses these things interchangeably back and forth. I followed it up in the 12 and 12. And not only does he do it in the 12 and 12, he even does it worse in the 12 and 12. So basically we're talking about the same thing in step 5 as a wrong, in step 6 as a defect, and in step 7 as a shortcoming.
He says this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects, he did it again right there, with another person. We think we've done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. Well, there's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find that a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We'll be more reconciled discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. That's a pretty good reason, I think, to go ahead and do the 5th step. But you know, a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. I did the very best I could do with the limited knowledge that I have in doing my inventory. Solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. To give you an example, I know several of you guys and gals around, at least you guys, there's several defective characters in this room. Plain as day for me to see. Because you see, I can see
one right here on the
and
front
one
wall.
right here, plain. The reason I can see your defective character is because there's nothing between you and me except air. No problem me seeing your. If I had any defective character, you could probably see mine. But you see, it's hard for me to see me because I have a lifetime of rationalization and justification. And I can't see past all that. And I need another human being who's done these things before me who could help me see me so I can't see myself. And another human being can do that. They can help me see things in me that I couldn't see. Solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. I did the best I could do at the time. And now we need another human being to help us see more things.
Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they'd lost their egoism. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they'd humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. Now, that little statement about all their life story is what really confused us for years in step 4. Not knowing how to do step 4, we wrote all our life story. And when we'd take it in for a step 5, I did that. It probably wasn't very important to other people. It must have been to me. There was about 92 pages in it. And I took it to another poor, suffering alcoholic and asked him to read it. And he read it, and he said, "Not very pretty, is it?" I said, "No, it isn't." He threw it in a waste paper basket. He said, "You'll never have to be that way again." And I learned nothing to contribute to my alcoholism from the writing of my life story. Because you see, I already knew everything I wrote down before I ever wrote it down. And as I look back now, 95% of my life story has nothing to do with my alcoholism. The fact that I was born in 1929 has nothing at all to do with my alcoholism. May have something to do with somebody else's, but not mine. The fact I graduated from high school, went directly into service at age 17, I don't think it's got a thing to do with my alcoholism. The fact I was married at age 21, I don't think it's got anything to do with it. But the 95% that had nothing to do with it very effectively covered up the 5% that did. So I learned nothing to contribute to my alcoholism. But we have no quarrel with this all their life story statement here at all. Because if I have really done the inventory the way we've just done it out of the big book, I am sharing all my life story. You see, my resentments didn't come just today. They've been popping in my head as far back as I can remember. I've shared all my life story resentment-wise. My fears didn't come just today. They've been popping in my head as far back as I can remember. I've shared all my life story fears-wise. The harms I've done to others, I didn't hurt them just today. I've been hurting people all my life. My mother told me one time, said, "Charlie, you the meanest kid I ever saw." She said, "I had a little trouble loving you myself." When Mama's got trouble loving you, you got a problem. So I've shared all my life story, and that really is my life story. It all revolves around my resentments and my fears and my harms that I've done to other human beings. So we have no quarrel with that. Here's the real reason we need 5.
These forms are very handy right here now. Because when you take these forms to another human being who understands what we're doing, we can discuss these from left to right now. And here's where we can tell someone else all our life story. We can talk about column 1 all we wish to. We can talk about column 2 all we wish to. 3, 4, 5, all the way down. And the 5th column is where they're going to ask a lot of questions. And we're going to talk about those all we wish to. And then we can tell all of our life story resentment-wise, going from left to right, all the way across, and then taking this on down to the next one, the next one, the next one. And when we get through, we have told someone else all our life story, resentment-wise. I was telling someone at break that this is a good form, but one of the reasons is to remind you to talk about it when you get to your 5th step. That's why simplicity is the key. just to remind you to talk about these things where you tell all your life story in the 5th step. That's very simple.
Now, the book says more than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He's very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he's revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension, and that makes for more drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. It really doesn't make any sense. We alcoholics go in there and lay down on that psychiatrist's couch and pay them $75 or $100 or whatever they charge an hour, and we'll lie to them for the whole damned hour. We've never told anybody the truth. I think we alcoholics have become the world's greatest con artist. You have to do that. You have to be that if you're going to be a good practicing alcoholic. You got to learn how to lie, how to cheat, how to con, how to manipulate, how to steal if necessary. And I think the one we have to lie to the most is ourselves. I don't think we could live with ourselves if we had to see what's going on when we're out there doing our thing. But you see, we don't ever have to see that. We've got a convenient thing called resentments that we use to transfer all blame to others and make ourselves as pure as the driven snow. Now, if you've been doing that for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, and you come to AA and you do step 4, well, you be just as honest as you can with yourself. But let's face it, we can't be honest with ourselves. No human being can be honest with themselves. There's always layers of rationalization and justification that comes into everything. And all great spiritual people will tell us today that one of the greatest things in their life is to share this stuff with another human being, because they don't really trust themselves. And we're getting ready to start out now on a lifetime-changing job, and we want to be sure that the things we're trying to change are the right things. And that's where we need the help of another human being. Now, on page 74, it tells us who to select. Now, in 1939, page 74 was a very valid page. But in 1939, the first guy that got this book in Illinois, he didn't have an AA person to talk to. Very difficult to find somebody to do this step 5 with. So it suggests we may go to a priest or a rabbi or a minister. It even says, well, hell, we might do it with someone in our own family if necessary. But today that isn't true. Mm-hmm. Today we've got plenty of good AA sponsors who understands steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 according to the big book. And they can help us see those things about ourselves that we can do. We just simply cannot always see that. So I think the real criteria of who to take it with is, do they really understand what we're trying to do? Do they understand 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 according to the big book? If we belong to a religion that requires confession, we probably should go ahead and do that too. But still, we need to be sure that somebody that we're talking to can help us see those things we can't see. That's the real criteria on who to take it with. And thank God we got lots of good sponsors today in AA that can do that. Page 75, that tells us how to go about doing this.
So when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. There was that time factor again. We have written an inventory and prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we're engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our competence. And I'm so very fortunate to have had a fellow named Franklin Williams, who was sober in AA a long time and knew and understood this process. I called Franklin up. He lived over in Olive Branch, Mississippi, and I said, Franklin, can I come over this weekend and we do my fifth step? He said, sure. So I went over there on Friday, got there Friday evening, and I said, well, you know I'm here to do the fifth step. He said, yeah. He said, why don't you and I do the third step prayer together? That's the kind of sponsor he was. And we did the third step prayer together, did it practically every time we got together. And we started off to do my fifth step. Franklin encouraged me to talk about all these situations, and he asked me a lot of questions that I would have never thought of. And we talked about them. Went and spent most of the weekend talking about them, except for the times we would go to a meeting or eat lunch or whatever. But it was a tremendous, tremendous experience for me. He said, we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character and every dark cranny of the past. Once having taken this step withholding nothing, we are delighted.
Now, here's some more positive results.
He said, we can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but we now begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we're on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. I drove back home that weekend, and it's about an 8-hour drive. And all the way home, I just thank God that I was able to get into Alcoholics Anonymous and to do this fifth step. See, I used to lay awake nights, many, many days and nights, thinking if I could just get everything back to zero just one more time, if I could just ever get it squared away, just one time, I'd be okay. And this is a way for me to begin to do that. I could see the steps coming up and what they meant, and I wanted to do those things. I wanted to get my life straightened up and squared up just one more time. And I promised myself I wouldn't mess it up this time. And so far I haven't, thank God.
Okay, now if you've done step 4 and you've done step 5, you've done quite a bit of work. And the book gives us a little rest stop now at the end of step 5. It says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. He doesn't say 2 weeks or 3 months. 1 hour. Carefully reviewing what we've done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. We don't know Him yet, but we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals or steps, we ask if we've omitted anything. For we are building an arch through which will walk a free man last. Is our work solid far? Are the stones properly in place? We skimped on cement into the water without sand. Once again, we're referring to that wonderfully effective spiritual structure through which we're going to pass to freedom. Step 1, willingness was the foundation. Step 2, believing was the cornerstone. Step 3, decision was the keystone, and he told us it's an arch. Now in steps 4 and 5, we put 2 more stones in place. We ask ourselves those questions. And on page 76, if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing, and that's all of step 6. And if you'll notice, He didn't say a thing in there about defects of character, did He? He did say those things which we have admitted are objectionable. Now surely when we took our inventory and we looked out in that 5th column and we saw that old selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate character that we had become, when we could see that those are the things that create our problems for us, cause us to do the things that we do that hurt others, then surely those things by now have become objectionable to us. Are we now ready to turn those things loose? If we are, then we've already completed step 6. But the book also recognizes that self cannot overcome self. We're always going to need God's help. It says if we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. You know, you would think that after we see what those things do to us, that we'd be more than willing to turn loose of them. But sometimes we human beings are funny things. Sometimes we would rather sit in today's pain and suffering because we've kind of learned how to take care of that and handle it. Sometimes we'd rather sit in today's pain and suffering than take a chance on changing in the future because we don't know what change is going to bring in the future. You know, if I'm going to have to turn loose of my selfishness, then how am I going to get what I want? If I'm going to have to turn loose of my dishonesty, then how am I going to make a living? I don't know anything about being honest. If I'm going to have to turn loose of my selfish, self-seeking, frightened nature, then where in the world am I going to get the courage to do the things that I need to do or quit doing the things I ought to quit? I don't know anything about courage. I just know fear. If I'm going to have to turn loose of my inconsideration, then who's going to take care of me? See, sometimes we would rather sit right there than take a chance on changing. And I went to my sponsor and I said, I don't think I could do 6 and 7. He said, why? I said, because if God takes away all my character defects, I'm not going to have any personality left at all. And he said, you're about 100% right. But he said, what you don't understand, if God takes them away, they'll have to be replaced with something else. And the only thing that can replace them will be the opposite of them. And you'll find that life is so much better, you'll wonder why it took you so long to get around to doing it. But he said, you'll never know unless you're willing to take the chance. So between he and God, I became willing to turn loose of these character defects, even though it was a scary deal to do so. Now the book says, when ready, we say something like this. My Creator, I'm now willing that you have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character. Whoop, we're in step 7 now. Step 7 said shortcomings, but here he doesn't even mention shortcomings. He calls them defects of character. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands away of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. Are you ready to have God remove all those defects of character? If you are, you've already done step 1 or step 6. Have you humbly asked him to do so? If you have, you've done step 7. But please don't make the mistake I did. Because knowing that God is all-powerful and that he can do whatever he wants to do, I assumed that all I'll have to do now is turn to God and say, okay, God, here I am, warts and all, give me the $29.95 special, and zap be and make me as pure as the riven snow. And I'd never have to worry about it again. No, I found out it doesn't work that way. God will do for me what I can't do for myself. He will not do for me what I can do for myself. I don't have the power to remove a character defect. Only God has that power. But he cannot remove a character defect and leave another hole in my personality. If I want that character defect removed, it's going to have to be replaced with something else. And the only thing that can replace it is the opposite of the character defect. And if I want God to take away my selfishness, then I'm going to have to muster all the strength I can and get all the help I can from God. And in every situation that comes up, start trying to practice unselfishness. And oh God, that's hard for me to do, because I've been a selfish individual all my lifetime. But as I practice unselfishness with God's help over and over and over and over, an old idea dies and a new idea takes its place. And slowly, slowly, selfishness is replaced with unselfishness. If I want Him to take away my dishonesty, then I must, in every situation, with God's help, force myself to practice honesty. And slowly, 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 the old idea dies and a new one takes its place. If I want Him to take away my self-seeking, frightened nature, then I've got to start practicing faith and courage and make myself do the things I was afraid to do, and make myself, with God's help, quit doing those things I was afraid to quit. And slowly, 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 the old idea dies and a new one takes its place. If I want Him to take away inconsideration, then I must, in every case that comes up, with all the strength I've got and all the power I can get from God, start trying to consider other people and their needs and their wants. And slowly the old idea dies and a new one takes its place. You see, my mind, when I got here, I was 38 years old. Didn't really start working the program until I was 40 years old. And my mind was a set of mental habits ingrained in a lifetime of living a life run on self-will. And the only way you break a habit is you have to work against yourself. You can't keep doing the same old things and thinking the same old way and change at the same time. And I can't change without God's help. But slowly, slowly, over a period of years, I've become a reasonably unselfish human being. Not always, but usually unselfish. Over a period of years, I've become an honest human being. I don't tell very many lies anymore, and I haven't stolen anything in a long, long time. Slowly, over a period of years, I'm a human being that has the courage and the faith to do the things that I need to do and quit doing the things I was afraid to quit. Slowly, over a period of years, I have become a considerate human being. In almost all cases, I place the welfare and the needs of others ahead of my own. I have been reborn. Not in my body, but in my mind. I think we're the luckiest people in the world. Most people out there are sick, and most of them are going to the grave not even knowing they're sick. They don't know what's wrong with them. We not only know we're sick, we know what's wrong with us. And we have the tools in step 6 and 7 to change that. And we have the opportunity to live 2 lifetimes in 1 lifetime. Very few people get to do that. I just don't know of anybody in the world that has a greater opportunity than we have through steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. But now be very careful here, because if you buy into this idea, then that means from this day on, you are responsible for what you are. I can't blame it on Mother any longer. Can't blame it on Daddy any longer. Can't blame it on God any longer. Can't blame it on society any longer. If I stay selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate, and all screwed up, it must be because that's the way I want to be. I do not have to be that way anymore. Thank God for that.
You know, there's always a paradox in AA, isn't there? Y'all know what a paradox is? I'll give you an illustration. How many of you ever called your sponsor up so you could listen? Call them so we could talk, right? That's the paradox. But the paradox in here is that they've used the doctor's opinion in the first 4 chapters to do steps 1 and 2. 3.5 pages to do step 3, 8 pages to do step 4, 4 pages to do step 5, and a whole chapter, chapter 7, on working with others. The paradox is that 2 of the biggest steps in all of Alcoholics Anonymous are here on 2 little paragraphs. These are the biggest steps in all of Alcoholics Anonymous. These are the tools of change, if you will. These are the tools of acceptance. There was a movement a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, that you just walk around accepting things, you know. Acceptance is an event. It's not an event, it's a process. And this is a process to accept. You know, there was a story in that other big book. This guy's name was Judas. Judas could not accept what he'd done. And what did he do? He killed himself. That's what he did, because he couldn't accept what he had done. These are the tools of acceptance, the tools, the process of change. Time I got to step 6, I could see what I had become, and I didn't like it, really. And a little doubt began to creep into my mind. I said, can God really do this? Can he really take this away from me and change me? Really? And I had to remember what it said there earlier. God either is or he isn't. God's everything or else he's nothing. God either can or he can't. And what's my choice going to be? And I chose to believe that he could. You know, in the other big book, there's a story in there. The guy's name was Saul. That's where these steps come from, really. His name was Saul. And Saul was riding his donkey or his ass on the way to Damascus. That's the way the book said. And a big bolt of lightning come down and knocked him off his ass on his ass. That's the way I read it. And he's dusting himself off, and a big booming voice said, "Hey, Saul, can we talk?" Well, yeah, we can talk. Got his attention, you see. Maybe alcoholism got our attention, too. He said, "Yeah, we can talk. What do you want to talk about?" He said, "Saul, you've been a very angry individual, and you've harmed a lot of people, and you're selfish and self-centered and self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, and you've hurt a lot of people doing that." And he said, "I want you to quit doing that." And he said, "Well, how do you quit doing that?" He said, "Well, do these things," basically 6 and 7. "And when you do that, then you'll change. And when you make the change, we'll call you Paul." And we all know that Paul was one of the greatest writers the world's ever known. He was in a little town in Corinthians one time. They asked Paul a question, and everybody wants to know the answer to this question. They said, "Paul, what is the secret to life?" And he said, "The secret to life is daily dying. The old Saul has to die, so the new Paul comes alive." 6 and 7, the tools of change, to change from what I have become to that which God intends for me to be. The tools of acceptance. Once we accept these things, then we're free, really free.
The only people we ever see fail at this thing are those that refuse to change. They want to keep on doing the same things they've always done, keep on thinking the way they've always thought, and they end up doing the same thing they'll always go back to drinking again. But if we're willing to change, we've got the tools to do it, and we can become anything that we wish to be if we're really willing to do this. Now then, we got rid of resentments. That was replaced with love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill. We got rid of fear. That was replaced with faith and courage. But this storeroom back here in the back of my head that was filled with guilt and remorse associated with the people I've hurt in the past, we've never done anything yet about emptying that storeroom out. And God can't get in there either because of the guilt and remorse. And now that I've worked my way through 6 and 7 and I'm beginning to change, then my entire attitude toward the things I've done to others will probably be changing also. And if I want God to direct my entire thinking, then I'm going to have to do something about that guilt and remorse that's got that storeroom filled up. And it's long been known that the only way human beings get rid of guilt and remorse associated with the things they've done in the past is to make restitution for those things. Now, I don't know anybody that wants to make restitution. You know, I've seen a lot of new people come to AA and read the steps off the wall and comment on a certain particular step, but I've never heard one of them yet say, "Boy, that step 8 and 9 looks like it's going to be a lot of fun I can hardly wait till I get there. Nobody likes to take from today's living and pay back for things that happened yesterday or a year or 5 or 10 ago. Nobody likes to have to go back and apologize to others for things they've done to them, ask for forgiveness. The only question is, can we afford not to do that? And it seems as though if we don't do that, that old guilt and remorse just keeps eating at us and keeps eating at us. And next thing you know, we've got a lot of fear coming back. Afraid of what they're going to do when we run into them, and a lot of worry about whether we should or shouldn't make these amends. And next thing you know, resentments start coming back. And the next thing you know, we're blocked off from God. And next thing you know, we end up drunk all over again. So for me, the restitution, the steps 8 and 9, it's not a question of whether I want to do it or not. The question is whether I can afford not to do 8 and 9. And I found for me it was absolutely essential.
I have been physically ill from drinking. I mean, really sick. Sick. I weighed 130 pounds when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. You can tell I've been somewhere for a while. But I eat occasionally because I knew you were supposed to eat a bologna sandwich from time to time. Mostly I drank, and I drank a lot. And I had gotten awful sick physically from drinking. And throwing up blood, I've done a lot of that. But, that wasn't the contributing cause as to why I wanted to get sober. Those things were part of the cause, part of the reason why I wanted to get sober. But if you think about it, the real reason I wanted to get sober is because the guilt, shame, and remorse that I had as a result of the harm I'd done to other people. That's the main reason why I wanted to get sober and get my life straightened out, to make amends, to get that squared away somehow or other. I didn't know how. 8 and 9 is the best thing in the world you could do for yourself, really, is make restitution to those that we've harmed. And this book is going to tell us how to do that.
On the third paragraph on page 76, now we need more action. See, there's not any place that we really stop in this thing, period. We continue on. Without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we've harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made that list, some off the resentment sheet, some the fear sheet, some of the sex sheet, some off the harms other than sex. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes.
More prayer.
Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. And again, the book recognizes self cannot overcome self. You recognize that we might not be willing to make some of these amends. But it says if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. And eventually the willingness will come.
A lot of times if you're in a step study meeting, we're studying step 8, listen to it. Most people would be talking about how they went about doing step 9, how they made their amends. But step 8 is a definite step, and we need to do step 8. We make a list of all the people we've harmed. We take them all off of column 1, put them on one long list, and become willing to the list. And if we're not willing, we simply ask God to help us to become willing. Step 8 is a definite step. It needs to be done. And I think step 9, which we're going to talk about in a minute, is one place that we need our sponsor more than any other place, I guess, in doing step 9. Because in our zeal to get things squared away with a lot of people, we run out there and make some amends to people that maybe don't even know how we've harmed them. And we tell them about it, and boy, they really are harmed then, and might harm other people doing it. So try these things out on your sponsor before you go out making amends, and find out which is the best way to do it, when to do it, when not to do it, and so on and so forth, and find out how to go about doing it. It may cause a lot more harm if we're not careful.
In the Oxford Group program, this was just one step called restitution. And they were having a hell of a time with that step. And it's one of those that Bill decided needed to be changed a little bit. And he took restitution and he put it into 2 steps so we could do them separately. They're a definite, separate thing. And step 8 is a very simple step. We made a list of all persons we've harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Doesn't say a thing about making amends to them. Just says we made the list and become willing to make amends to them all. And that's step 8. Now, step 9 is different. Step 9 is a definite multiple part step. Distinct parts in it that tell us exactly what to do. It tells us the kind of amends to make. It said we made direct amends. It tells us when to make them, wherever possible. Now, a lot of people read that as whenever possible. I hear it read all the time, but it's wherever possible. You tell an alcoholic to do something whenever, hell, forget it. It's not going to get done. See? It's wherever possible. And then it tells us when not to make them, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, Bill very carefully in the next few pages addresses all 3 of these issues. And we're not going to try to do this whole thing, but there's 2 or 3 items we ought to look at. One of them, I think, is this idea of direct amends. There's probably 2 kinds of direct amends. One is eyeball to eyeball, one-on-one, face-to-face. You know, the purpose of me making my amends to you is not to get you to like me. Hopefully you will when I'm through. But the purpose is to get rid of my fear, my guilt, and my remorse associated with that. And if I send you a letter, or if I call you on the telephone, I'm never quite sure how you have accepted that. I'm still concerned about what you're going to say when I run into you the next time. I'm not sure I've done my utmost. But if I go sit down with you wherever you might be, your office, your home, your wherever, and I make my amends to you directly, eyeball to eyeball, face to face, then you will have done the worst you're going to do to me right then, and I will know that I've done my utmost. That's one kind of direct amend. And that particular kind of amend, he talks about it on page 77. Down in the middle paragraph, and I don't know why, but it's the 3rd sentence is where it starts. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. This will be an example of direct amend, eyeball to eyeball.
Now, if you're like me, you got your long list. There's 3 or 4 or 5 people on that list that I'm never going to make amends to because they have harmed me more than I've harmed them. And so I'm not going to make any amends to them. And I went to my sponsor and I said, I can't make amends to those. I just can't do it. He said, well, how come? I said, well, these people harmed me more than I've harmed them. He said, but isn't there some other people on that list that maybe you could make amends to? And I said, well, sure. But I'm not going to make any amends to them, but these other people make amends to me, the way I looked at it. He said, well, if you look over your list, and those people that you can make amends to right now, that you're willing to do it right now, yeah. He said, well, take them off that list and put them on a sheet, call them the right now list. You can go out and make amends to them right now, your wife and your daughter and some other people. Yeah, we'll do that. And he said, well, isn't there some people on there that you're willing to make amends to, but maybe you'll make them a little bit later? Is that right? I said, yeah. He said, well, write down a little bit later and take the list and take some names off of that list and put them on the later list. Then when you get those done, there's some people that maybe you'll make amends to and maybe you won't. We'll talk about it and put them on the maybe list. And then when you get through with those, then we'll talk about those that we're never going to make amends to. And you can put them on the never list. And as I said here today, 30 years later, I've took care of the right nows, I took care of the laters, I took care of the maybes, and those never, never, nevers, I've took care of those too. Totally free from all of that. Thank God. But we need our sponsor, definitely. The direct amend. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. It may be he has done us more harm than we've done him, and though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we're still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend. But we find it much more beneficial to us. See, making amends is beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feelings and expressing our regret. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply we tell him that we'll never get over drinking until we've done our utmost to straighten out the past. We're there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we'll be gratified with the results. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own faults, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we're doing and wish us well. Occasionally they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We've made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. And every time I read that, I think about my cousin Gary. Gary and I were just exactly alike, almost. Lived next door to each other. Couldn't be around each other hardly without fussing and fighting and physically hurting each other. We had to basically agreed to stay away from each other. And I was in the area making amends that one time. And I was in this restaurant, and I've never been in this restaurant before or since. And I looked up, and Gary was standing at the door. And I thought, is this odd or is this God? I don't know. So I motioned Gary over, and he came over very reluctantly because he wasn't sure what I might do. And I asked him to sit down, and he did. And I said, Gary, I've joined Alcoholics Anonymous and trying to get my life straightened out. And one of the things I need to do is to make amends to people that I've harmed. And I've harmed you all my life in one way or another. And would you forgive me for that? He kind of relaxed like that. He said, well, Joe, would you forgive me for the things I've done to you? And it all went away just like that. And the best thing about all this is not only is that cleared away, but from time to time, Gary comes to Alcoholics Anonymous. From time to time. Well, he used to be a daily drinker. Now he's a periodic drinker. He's making progress. But when he does come, though, he comes to the group that I attend, and we will share as much as he will allow me to about this program. Not a whole lot, but enough. But he keeps trying, but he hasn't made it yet. But had that not happened many, many years ago, that never would have happened for us. Hopefully someday he'll get sober.
Now, if that kind of direct amend would work on somebody you hate, well, then surely it would work on somebody you just don't care too much about them. Probably work on those that you kind of like. I'll bet you it would work on those you love, too. Eyeball to eyeball, face to face, one-on-one. Another kind of direct amend is in equal proportion. You know, some of we alcoholics had a tendency to steal a little money that we never did pay back. Some of us had a tendency to write hot checks we never did pick up. Some of us had a tendency to run up bills we never did pay. Some of us had a tendency to borrow money we never did pay back. Some of us had a tendency to wreck a few cars that we never did fix. What are we going to do about that kind of stuff? Bill handles that in the very next paragraph. He said most alcoholics owe money. Now, I think that's the understatement of the year, don't you? We do not dodge our creditors, tell them what we're trying to do. We make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go. For we're liable to drink if we're afraid to face them. And I think what he's saying to me is, if you owe this guy some money, you go there and talk to him. And I go with her and I tell this guy, you and I both know that I owe you $500. I don't have the money to pay you today. I wish I could, but I can't. But I'd like to start paying you $5 a week, whatever I think I can live with. And you'd rather have $5 a week than nothing. And I start paying you that $5 a week. And some morning I wake up and, by golly, that sucker's paid off. I don't have to worry about that one anymore, do I? I go to the next one. I say, now you and I both know that I owe you a couple $1,000. And there's no way I can pay you today. I wish I could, but I can't. But I'd like to start paying you $20 a week. By this time, I'm probably making a little more money. And I start paying you that $20 a week, and someday I'll wake up, and by golly, that one's paid for too. And then I go to the next one, and I go to the next one, and I go to the next one, and I go to the next one. And some morning I'll wake up, and by golly, they're all paid for. And the fear and the guilt and the remorse associated with that, it's no longer there anymore. This is the way we build self-esteem. This is the way we feel good about ourselves, by making restitution for the things that we have done in the past. Now, I hear some of you saying, well, Charlie, that's probably true for 500 or 2,000 or 3,000. But what if it's 50,000? What if it's 100,000? What if it's 500,000? Could we do that? Well, I don't see any reason why we can't. If we're smart enough to steal it, we're probably smart enough to pay it back. You know, I think we forget from step 3 on, God's with us. And if we're to do these things and we're willing to do these things, then God's going to make it possible to do so. Sometimes we can't see the end result. We can't see the way to do it. But if we're willing to do so and are willing to make the effort, then God's going to see that this can happen for us. Joe and I had an old good AA mentor that lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. His name was Dan. Dan's dead now. He would have been sober how many years, Joe?
Last January was 50.
It was 50 years last January. Dan was 29 years sober, and he said, Charlie, I paid the last one of them last week. And I said, Dan, how do you feel? He said, I feel about 8 foot tall. Now, Dan was a little bitty fellow, about 5 foot tall. He said, this is the first time in my life that I can ever remember that I don't owe somebody something for what I've stolen from them in the past. He said, I feel pretty good about old Dan. When Dan was drinking, he was in the oil business down in Texas. And he hooked them, and he hooked them big, too. He hooked them big. Took him 29 years to pay them back. And Joe and I, we've known him ever since we got sober. And Dan and his wife, Sarah, beautiful Al-Anon, they never had a whole lot of anything, but they had everything they needed. They had a good place to live, good automobile to drive, good food to drink, went to AA and Al-Anon conviction. They never wanted for anything. God made it possible for Dan to do that.
Oh, Dan was slick, though, wasn't he, Charlie?
Tell you how slick he was. When he was drinking down in Texas, Sarah took him to the state insane asylum in Big Spring, Texas, to have him committed for alcoholic insanity. And the head psychiatrist interviewed Sarah, and then he interviewed Dan. And after a while, Dan left, and Sarah was locked up. She stayed there for a year. She learned how to live better electrically while she was in there. And the beautiful Al-Anon, she said, I've forgiven that son of a bitch for everything except that. Okay.
He's pretty slick.
Now again, we're not going to try to go through all this. It just takes too much time. But at the bottom of page 78, you have criminal offenses. It tells us what to do there. In the middle of page 79, it tells us what to do where other people are involved. Over on page 80, it talks about going to other people that's going to be involved and get their permission before we start making those particular kind of amends. the bottom of page 80, it talks about domestic problems. Page 81, it talks about sex outside of marriage.